Whether they simply joined the party late and their presence in the group did more bad than good, were just a silly addition that nobody ever really needed, or were even the squad's bizarre leader and weak link at the very same time. This lot will go down in history as the worst parts of some of the most legendary wrestling factions ever. So I'm Gareth, this is What Culture Wrestling, and here are 11 awful members of iconic wrestling stables. Number 11, Michael Tava, Nexus. In Nexus's debut on WWE programming back in June 2010 is still one of the most shocking ways Monday Night Raw has ever gone off the air. A group of hungry, violent young stars ripping through established names like CM Punk and John Cena, along with the entire ringside area and squared circle. The potential was certainly there to create a few new genuine top stars. However, even before the unit were frustratingly defeated by John Cena's team WWE at SummerSlam, it was evident that not all of these performers were destined for main event superstardom. In fact, some of them didn't even look like they were interesting enough to occupy a space in a then pretty unremarkable mid-card. Michael Tava was unquestionably the most forgettable additional body of the lot, seemingly just acting as a nothing player brought in to look tough in the background, whilst Wade Barrett did the talking. The rest of the faction's members at least had something slightly interesting to offer, while Tava simply became the unmemorable worker who just wore a bandana on his face, and did very little else to stand out from the rest. Number 10, Hornswoggle, D-Generation X. Though the version of D-Generation X that first burst onto the scene during the Attitude Era was undoubtedly one of the most influential and edgy teams the wrestling world has ever known, their mid to late 2000s reboot was anything but. A Triple H and Shawn Michaels, who were once the cheeky rebels of WWE, instead came across like a pair of childish old men, with the unit's targeting of the Spirit Squad with crap, and little people leaving folks wincing for all the wrong reasons. And it was that constant bullying of little people that eventually led to the recruiting of WWE's resident leprechaun, Hornswoggle. The whole thing was about as dumb, offensive, and painful as you'd expect. After being a-holes to the former Cruiserweight champion for a spell, HBK and the Game were eventually taken to little people's court. Because lol, look how little everything is, are you not entertained? That particularly awkward skit and many of the others involving poor Hornswoggle and other diminutive figures being the butt of the degenerates' jokes, with WWE at their deeply unfunny PG era worst. And Swaggle eventually acting as DX's mascot just opened the door for even more stupid backstage nonsense. The helmet-wearing member hilariously attacking Santino Marella like Triple H's personal guard dog just about summed up everything that was wrong with this surreal piece of recruiting and faction as a whole at this point in time. Number 9, Shawn Michaels NWO. It turns out that D-Generation X members Hornswoggle and Shawn Michaels both have something in common. Each black and green wearing individual eventually made an iconic faction instantly worse. Admittedly, the once unstoppable NWO unit had already seen its fair share of absolutely dreadful additions over the years, with just about every name on the WCW roster donning various versions of the iconic shirts before the promotion died a death / was bought by WWE in 2001. But HBK's joining of the sports entertainment iteration of the villainous squad was perhaps the worst of the lot, mostly due to just how little sense the whole thing made. After all, Michaels had been a WWE guy throughout the Monday Night Wars, making him the very first member of the team who never wrestled under a WCW contract. And with HBK also being a part of the aforementioned DX Rebels for a time, WWE's answer to Hulk Hogan's anti-heroes, the whole thing just felt like a dumb way to get him on screen with old pal Kevin Nash. Too sweet, bro. The faction, one made up of the aforementioned Clickmates, Big Show, and X-Pac by 2002, was already way past its best by the time a then retired Michaels bafflingly joined their ranks. And HBK's arrival as the NWWE's mouthpiece was an ill-thought-out move that couldn't save the unit from finally being disbanded a month or so later. Again, you could chuck a number of names into the awful NWO member category, but Michaels as technically the team's final ever leader was just odd. And while we're on the subject of the NWO, I want to know what was your favorite ever NWO moment. Probably not Shawn Michaels joining, but you let me know what was in the comment section down below. Number 8, Rocko the Doll, Legion of Doom. Joining Hornswoggle as an unexpected mascot who did absolutely nothing for one of the greatest units of all time, the legendary Road Warriors / Legion of Doom added a rather wooden member back in 1992. Hawk and Animal, along with their manager Paul Ellering, were eventually joined by a ventriloquist doll by the name of Rocko in WWE. That's right, two of the most terrifying forces of nature ever to roar down a WWE ramp was saddled with a ridiculous puppet mascot, complete with badass leather jackets and shades, of course. And why? Well, according to Animal, this was the company's way of attempting to both show a softer side of the frightening Road Warriors and move some more merchandise. In other words, Rocko was WWE's 1990 version of the horrifying Lily folks. Others would join forces or make up members of the iconic faction as the years rolled by, with the likes of Heidenreich, Droz, Ahmed Johnson, and Kensuke Sasaki all going full Road Warrior at points, to varying degrees of success. However, it's hard to look past that creepy little dummy, one that would eventually mysteriously go missing at the airport after completely undermining the Icon's awesome SummerSlam 1992 entrance as the Legion of Doom's worst ever ally. Number 7. Bone Soldier, Bullet Club. No matter where you look, Bullet Club's fingerprints are all over the modern-day wrestling business. WWE's current top babyface sensation Cody Rhodes, AEW's elite EVPs, Judgment Day Kings, OC Lads, Undisputed Kingdom leaders, and many more have all formed part of the unit at different times. And while the faction's alumni section may be an absolute who's who of top-level talent, not every BC member has been a hit. Some of those shots have well and truly missed the target. Perhaps the biggest miss in Bullet Club history can be seen in the utter embarrassment that was the Bone Soldier character. A gimmick so dreadful, not only did one-time BC leader Kenny Omega once class him as an intergalactic disaster, the one-time captain New Japan also earned the title of Worst Gimmick of 2016 in the Wrestling Observer Newsletter Awards. Unsurprisingly, the dreadful member didn't last too long within the stable, with the crap Halloween mask, tracksuit pants, and skull shirt wearing jobber being released just 6 months on from joining the squad. A new Bone Soldier would ultimately arrive in 2018, with Teiji Ishimori picking up the mantle this time around, and instantly being an improvement on the prior iteration, though it didn't take much, did it? Number 6. Sim Snooker Legacy. Known more for his stint as part of the silly greaser unit Deuce and Domino, and also being the guy that failed to catch The Undertaker at WrestleMania, Sim Snooker, son of Jimmy Snuka, actually also ended up being associated with a far more notable faction during his time as a WWE superstar. Though Randy Orton's own version of Evolution is largely remembered for being the stable that boasted the likes of a young Cody Rhodes and Ted DiBiase Jr., there were also a few other forgotten potential legacy players early on, along with Manu, who at least made a bit of an impact by helping to take out Batista in late 2008. Sim Snooker found himself in the pool of talent Orton was pretty much auditioning to join him in what would become the Legacy. Despite technically surviving longer than Manu during this early Legacy testing phase though, Sim was embarrassingly given the boot after not being the one to pick up the pin in a tag match alongside Rhodes. Looking every bit like a loser with a capital L, the painfully bland Sim then chose to align himself with Manu, as the rejected duo hatched a plan to assault Orton with another multi-generational talent. That secret ally was none other than DiBiase Jr., of course, with Ted soon turning his back on the Legacy tryout lads to form the official threesome. Put simply, Sim was just a dull body to be beaten on the road to establishing the real Legacy. Cheers for watching this video today, and click on that subscribe button down below for more What Culture Wrestling madness. Number 5. Sid The Four Horsemen. When you think of the iconic Four Horsemen stable, you typically visualize technical, calculating masters of their craft. A bunch of effortlessly cool, cold, and usually villainous pals, determined to do whatever it took to keep their place at the very top. What probably doesn't spring to mind is the image of a chaotic giant bellowing down the lens as his eyes bulge out of his skull. But that was exactly the visual that came to be when the Horsemen opted to bring in none other than Sid Vicious to combat the might of RoboCop. Yes, that was very much a situation these icons found themselves in back in 1990. It was a weird time. On paper, bringing in a big lad to reinforce the squad wasn't actually the worst idea, but the constant source of madness that was Sid just never really fit in with the likes of Ric Flair, Arn Anderson, and co. And his brief time as part of the unit is rarely remembered by the average Horseman enthusiast, mostly because of how bizarre and forgettable it was. Number 4. Jon Stewart, The New Day. 1 year on from popping the Barclays Center for his part in making sure John Cena didn't walk out of SummerSlam 2015 holding the WWE and United States Championship, former Daily Show presenter Jon Stewart was back once again for more summer fun. Only this time he clearly wasn't anywhere near as welcome, and it might have something to do with the fact he was filling in for a rather beloved member of an iconic babyface faction that night. That member was Big E, of course, who'd had his member driven into the ring post. Stewart was seemingly called in to play the role of a sympathetic honorary New Day member. Folks were supposed to give a damn about getting bullied by Luke Gallows and Carl Anderson during Kofi Kingston and Xavier Woods' match with the villains. But the whole thing was just a little bit awkward. On top of being booed throughout his appearance and producing a hugely unfunny slapstick performance as he squirmed away from Gallows and Anderson, Stewart's uncomfortable hip shaking soon cemented this guest as easily one of the worst things to ever happen to the adored New Day. New Day usually rocks. This and unicorn horn wearing Stewart did not. Number 3. Edge the Judgment Day. From one day to another, and to the bloke who actually started what is now classed as one of the greatest factions of modern times. But just because Edge was the mind behind Raw's top heel unit, the Judgment Day, a team he created to elevate underused talent, and partly to nudge Rhea Ripley and Beth Phoenix into a ring together, doesn't necessarily mean he's among the unit's best members. In fact, he's actually the worst. Sorry, Copeland. It didn't help that fans simply didn't want to boo a rated R superstar who'd incredibly reversed his retirement a few years earlier. However, as the unit's original chief, Edge just became an increasingly dull cult leader of sorts, spouting out mountain of omnipotence nonsense as he sat on his spooky throne, lacking any of the charm, threat, or chemistry that would soon help turn this black and purple unit into one of the breakout teams of 2022-23. Adam Copeland's exit turned out to be the greatest thing that ever happened to the flippin' Judgment Day. Number 2. Eli Cottonwood, the Wyatt family. In the wake of making a hell of an impact on the main roster in 2013, the late great Bray Wyatt's family saw a number of colourful characters come and go. But while the likes of Braun Strowman, Eric Rowan, the late Luke Harper, Daniel Bryan, and even Randy Orton all had their memorable moments as part of the captivating Wyatt family, there was actually another member who once stood beside the Waylon Mercy and Max Cady-inspired Wyatt leader. But you'd be forgiven for not knowing that Eli Cottonwood acted as Bray's silent muscle once upon a time, because he didn't actually do much of anything in the end. After just standing behind Wyatt during a few promos and matches down in FCW as the first ever member of Bray's Wyatt family in all but name, the not exactly terrifying Cottonwood was released just a few months into his run as Wyatt's pal, and that was the last WWE fans ever saw of the forgettable big man, with Eli ultimately being replaced by the likes of Rowan and Harper as the Wyatt family began to take NXT by storm. Number 1. The Creepers, the Dark Order. Oh boy! Before the terrific Brody Lee arrived to transform the silly faction into an entertaining force to be feared, the Dark Order were in a bad way on AEW programming, and it was mostly down to the fact the unit had one of the strangest debuts imaginable. Perching on a bunch of masked humans known as the Creepers, Evil Uno and Stu Grayson looked anything but menacing in the wake of battering the Best Friends and Angelico and Jack Evans at Double or Nothing 2019. But the worst was yet to come. Taking center stage in what ultimately went down in history as the worst ending in Dynamite history on December 18, 2019, those same stupid creepers swarmed the ring as the Dark Order looked to make a statement by battering the Elite and more. If that statement was "we are here to make your eyes roll at the worst worked punches in wrestling history," then mission accomplished. Thankfully, the immediately lame creepers ultimately disappeared as the late great Brody Lee helped salvage the seemingly doomed faction, turning this absolute AEW trash into a treasure of a unit who helped create some of the company's undisputed highlights. Did you enjoy this 11 awful members of iconic wrestling stables list? Then check out this 10 short-lived wrestling stables you've already forgotten video. It is wonderful. Bye bye.